Namaste, and welcome to our continuing series on the life divine with our beloved Ranga. We are continuing in the chapter Reality and the Integral Knowledge. Today we are on page 667, beginning with the sentence, "In fact, the Brahman is one not only in a featureless oneness."
So, look at the title of the chapter, Reality and the Integral Knowledge. So, there is a reality and we are in the ignorance and we don't see the reality. But as you keep climbing in consciousness, you start seeing the reality slightly more in focus, finally the integral knowledge, you know the reality fully. So this is a chapter, so he's telling us how at different levels, different ways of looking at this reality comes in. He has been using the word reality and conception. The reality is one for everybody, but our having experienced it, we are going to express it through our language, and it is bound to be different for everybody. Even if 10 people are looking at one event and you ask them to describe the event, not even 2 of them will use the same words. They'll all be using different words. So the conception and the expression of that reality will differ for everybody. Okay? But the reality will be the same for everybody. But even that reality has got different levels. So at each level, this phenomenon is repeated. Finally, in the supraphysical worlds, the reality is beyond words. It is ineffable. So naturally, when you are trying to put into words that which cannot be put into words, there will be a difference between one person and one person. So this is what he has been explaining to us, and I will, to situate ourselves, I will read out the summary of the previous para. This division between knowledge and ignorance, between spirit and matter, between the one and the many, this division between knowledge and ignorance, spirit and matter, is not acceptable to the integral view. The integral view rejects the irreconcilable opposition between spirit and matter. It sees these dualities not as contraries but as complements. It's like the obverse and reverse of a coin. The coin is the same. If you look at it this way, it's one. If you look at it the other way, one side is spirit, one side is matter. Okay, so obverse and reverse, complements. They are obverse and reverse of one single reality. It is not that when in the knowledge of the many, we cannot have the knowledge of the one, nor when we are in the consciousness of the one, we are unable to have the knowledge of the many. They are not alternate or exclusive states alien to each other. They can both coexist. That is an integral view. But we should not think that when I am in the many, I will be able to see the one, I will not be able to see the one unless I get rid of ego, desire and
mind.
The dualities. Okay? Ego, desire, attachment and the dualities have to disappear. Then even when I am in the first is you see the one. You go even higher up, you see the one in the many and the many in the one. The Upanishad speaks of the one in the many in the one, and the one becoming the many. Okay, so Vidya is knowledge, is undoubtedly knowledge of the one static permanent being. The one static permanent being is spirit. Avidya, ignorance, is self-forgetfulness of the one and the living in the maze of the multifarious movements of the becoming without the proper understanding of the many. Okay? So, Vidya and Avidya do exist. And Avidya, real Avidya is when you are living in the many without understanding the one. That's our condition. Okay? But you can be in the many with the full knowledge of the one. And that is the integral knowledge. Okay? So, but the soul can cure itself of this malady by possessing the one in the many. The soul can possess the knowledge of the one and of the many simultaneously, which is, you can call it a waking samadhi. Normally the samadhi is when you concentrate, meditate, you close your eyes and your consciousness rises there, but you are not conscious of the many. You become conscious only of the one. But when you are called back here, you see the many, but the remembrance of the many is there. Okay? So, now, the next thing what he says is, the exclusive possession of only any one aspect blinds us to the other and is a partial knowledge. The integral knowledge is to know both, just as the Isha Upanishad insists. Okay? So, when we possess the one, we are free from the bonds of attachment, ego and desire, and this allows a free possession of the many also. The knowledge of the many, which is science. Science is trying to get the knowledge of the many. Not perfectly, imperfectly, but yet, that's what they're trying to do. Is one aspect of knowledge which is a part of the whole. It becomes a disability only when we are imprisoned in body-mind life. When you are living in the many, but slave to your body-mind life, you are imprisoned and you are seeing only the many without understanding the reality. It becomes a disability only when we are imprisoned in body-mind life with desire, attachment and ego. Even in avidya, the secret vidya is always inherently in possession. Possession of the vidya, even in the many, is always possible. The integral knowledge is possible. Sometimes when you have the intermediary experiences, you feel that the most satisfying, this is obviously the final, but it's not so. Okay? So this is what he has said in the previous para. Now we come back to what we have to read today. In fact, the Brahman is one not only in a featureless oneness beyond all relation, but in the very multiplicity of the cosmic existence. Okay? So, I think we'll go sentence by sentence, it's faster.
Good.
So, the first is Brahman. In fact, the Brahman. What is the Brahman? It is the experience of the spiritual existence which is one. As soon as you climb out of your body-mind life, you lose identification with body-mind life, the consciousness goes to the higher mind level. It can go even higher. But you experience the Brahman. And what is the Brahman? It is one inexpressible, immutable, static consciousness that is absolutely pure and one, and normally it sees the physical world as unreal. Normally.
Not creative.
No, it is static. That's what is meant by static.
Yes.
It doesn't create. Okay? If you go slightly higher up in consciousness, you can see that it does create. It can create. But your first experience of it is no creation. Beyond all relation. Now, he speaks of relation. We should also have a very clear idea of what is relation. A relation necessarily wants two. You can't have a relation only with yourself. So when he speaks of relationless, he says beyond all relation, that means only one. It's a oneness. And a oneness implies purity. Because if there's some impurity somewhere, it's not one, it's two. Okay? So these are the importance you must attach to those words. What is Brahman, what is relation, but in the very multiplicity of the cosmic existence. Okay? So, what he is saying is that Brahman need not be only one. He can also be here. Okay? It's like take the example of a jet, a cannon, a water cannon, okay, to break up riots. They use a water cannon. Now, it comes out with great force. You look at it, you will see it's just one. Go 10 meters away, you will see droplets. Okay? So, that is a many and there is the one. Is there a difference? If you are ignorant, you will see only, oh, those are droplets. There are so many droplets. And if you see this is one. But if you are alert enough and you are in knowledge, you will see, but that also is water and this also is water. You see both. You see the oneness as well as the multiplicity.
When Sri Aurobindo speaks of the three aspects of the divine, the lowest one, I shouldn't say the lowest one, the one at the bottom is that identification of the divine with the human being.
With the human being who is in ignorance.
Who is in ignorance.
Yes. It's the inconscient. The inconscient also is the divine.
Correct.
You can say the divine is everything. It's our idea of good and bad,
Yes.
of something pure and impure,
Again, duality.
of some imperfect. These are our ideas because we are at that level. But the divine takes three poises, as you said. The first is the transcendent.
Yes.
The transcendent is one in which he is conscious only of himself and nothing else. So the world doesn't exist in that consciousness. Then he takes the form of the cosmos.
Yes.
He is there in the cosmos. And when people realize that nature is the divine, you have the philosophy of, what is it called? I keep forgetting the names. Pantheism.
Pantheism.
So you end up with pantheism.
Yes.
Then, when you experience the divine within yourself, you are so satisfied that you don't think of the cosmic and the transcendent. Okay? So that these are the three levels that the divine takes: transcendent, cosmic, and individual. Now, so I read the next sentence. Aware of the works of the dividing mind, but not itself limited by it, it finds its oneness as easily as in the many, in relations, in becoming, as in any withdrawal from the many, from relations, from becoming. So what he's saying is that Brahman, you can experience him as one, but you can also experience him as hiding in the many. He is there in the many, you see only the physical forms, but behind each physical form you see the reality which is one, which is the Brahman.
We can say that also about matter and
Yes.
the stone.
Yes, that's right.
He is also there.
His presence is there everywhere. It's like, in a very loose manner of speaking, I have 20 mango trees in my orchard. Okay? All of them have got fruits. Okay? So, I got so many, multiplicity. I got 100 mangoes on one plant. But essentially, each mango, although it is one form, it has got that quality of mango-ness, which is the oneness. So behind in each mango, whatever, I get the same taste.
And each one is different.
It's different. That's the thing. So one and the many. Okay, so the one is hiding everywhere. We can see this phenomena even in species. Take the species of cats, okay? There are any number of cats you can see, but all of them have something in common which you can't get confused with something else. If there is a dog or a camel, you can't say that this is a cat. So cat has got a similarity, something common. That's a unity, that's a oneness. And there is a many.
There's an interesting line in Savitri where Satyavan almost misses seeing Savitri. And then Mother calls him the genius of the species. What a beautiful line. The genius of the species.
So, aware of the works of the dividing mind. Now, dividing mind. Where does the multiplicity start? At the overmind level, which is the dividing mind. The function of mind is to separate, make clear, no haziness, no oneness anywhere, to have very clear distinction between this and this and this. If there is no distinction in our minds at the physical level, there will be a total amount of confusion. You will mix up truth and untruth. You will not be able to distinguish between a good friend and a bad friend and a bad person. So, the mind is absolutely essential with its quality of division and clarity and distinction in the physical world. That's why it is there. But unfortunately, that causes, when ego is there and attachment is there is the problem of ignorance. That's the whole problem. But you can have, even in the physical world, ignorance need not be there. You can see the oneness. That's not easy, but it's possible. That's what Srimad is saying. Okay? So, it finds its oneness as early as the many in relations, in becoming, as in any withdrawal from the many, from relations, from becoming. One small thing, the oneness is usually described as the being. It is one. And the becoming is a way of saying, talking about the multiplicity. It is becoming. There is a constant change. Okay, so ourselves also, now he is talking of the Brahman, but now he is saying the human soul also, ourselves also, to possess even its oneness fully, must possess it. Since it is there, since all is that, in the infinite self-variation of the cosmos. So, he himself always keeps talking about the possession. It's not enough to know. You have to possess. And when you possess something, it is subject to your will and your control. So, you have to possess that too, so that you can use it. So, possession is very important. Possession of soul, possession of self. Possession of the divine. He speaks of the possession of the divine. Yes. The infinity of the multiplicity finds itself explained and justified only when it is contained and possessed in the infinity of the one. So, the infinity of the multiplicity can be understood only when you go there. Just as I said, the water behind the dam is one, and it comes out in many, many streams. But if you want to know where did this river come from, you have to go to the source and you see that it is one. Somewhat like glaciers melting. See, the world is full of images of truth. This is one image. The glacier is one. But when it melts, it comes down into several rivers. Finally, when it's going into the sea, it's a, what they call it, delta, I think they call it. Many, many rivers. It breaks up into many channels and goes into the sea. And becomes one again. That's interesting. Okay, so, the infinity of the multiplicity finds itself explained and justified only when it is contained and possessed in the infinity of the one. But also, the infinity of the one pours itself out and possesses itself in the infinity of the many. So, it is the water behind the dam that creates the many. That's what he's saying. Okay. To be capable of that outpouring of its energies, as well as not to lose itself in it, not to recoil defeated from its boundlessness and endlessness of vicissitudes and differences, as well as not to be self-divided by its variations, is the divine strength of the free Purusha, the conscious soul in its possession of its own immortal self-knowledge. So he is saying that the divine Purusha, the free Purusha, can possess both the oneness as well as the many. That's a perfection that Srimad wants, the integral perfection. Possession of the immortal. The finite self-variations of the self, in which the mind, losing self-knowledge, is caught and dispersed among the variations, are yet not the denials, but the endless expression of the infinite and have no other meaning or reason for existence. So, what he is saying is, you are seeing the one and the many and you think they are opposites. But they are not opposites. The many are telling you that the one can become the many. And you can see the oneness in each of these many. That's what he is saying. The infinite too. No, I think I have left out this. Yeah. Oh, and they have no other reason for existence. That's right. So each one of the many is an expression of the one. Okay, so the infinite too, while it possesses its delight of limitless being, finds also the joy of that very limitlessness in its infinite self-definition in the universe. So what Srila is saying is that we are in ignorance, and when we go there, we enjoy the oneness. But the divine also is coming down here and enjoying the many. So if you want to enjoy the many, you have to go to the divine level, which is beyond the Brahman, the third level. From there you can come and then you can also enjoy this.
It would have to be supermind,
Yes.
not overmind.
No,
Right.
beyond the overmind. You have to go to
Right.
supermind. Okay, so the divine being is not incapable of taking innumerable forms because he is beyond all form in his essence, nor by assuming them does he lose his divinity, but pours out rather in them the delight of his being and the glories of his Godhead. This gold does not cease to be gold because it shapes itself into all kinds of ornaments and coins, itself into many currencies and values, nor does the earth power, principle of all this figured material, principle of all this figured material existence, lose her immutable divinity because she forms herself into habitable worlds, throws herself out in the hills and hollows, and allows herself to be shaped into utensils of the hearth and household, or as hard metal into the weapon and the engine. This is poetry.
Yeah, it really.
It's not prose, it's poetry. Okay, so wonderful. So what he's saying is, the relation between the one and the many is like, I have a table, I have got earrings, necklace, anklets, armlets, I have got all these gold ornaments on the table. But each one is only gold. That's the oneness, and all the forms are only the many.
And the table too is there.
Yeah?
The table is also there.
Yes. Okay. So, that's right. So he says everything is gold actually.
But the beauty of nature to throw out all these different things.
Yes. That's the creative power of the divine to enjoy the many.
Exactly.
It is nature which goes on producing the many endlessly. We see even in the biological world, we see forms are going on mutating and new species are coming out. New species of plants, new species of animals. It is creating endlessly and presenting all this to Purusha for his enjoyment. So the divine is enjoying his power creating all these things.
I see it much more now than 50 years ago. It's happening much more rapidly.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Okay, so I read that sentence again because it's such a fantastic sentence. Okay. This gold does not cease to be gold because it shapes itself into all kinds of ornaments and coins itself into many currencies and values, nor does the earth power, principle of all this figured material existence. Figure means limited form. A figure is a limited form. So figured material existence lose her immutable divinity because she forms herself into habitable worlds. So she makes 7 worlds in fact. Okay. Throws herself out in the hills and hollows. Wonderful. And allows herself to be shaped into utensils of the hearth and household. The hearth is the fireplace.
Yes.
So, utensils of the hearth, the kitchen, okay, and the household. Fantastic. Or as hard metal into weapon and engine. Okay. Matter, substance itself, subtle or dense, mental or material, is form and body of spirit and would never have been created if it could not be made a basis for the self-expression of the spirit. So, we go back to the first chapter of the Life Divine where he says, matter is not only a fit vestment for the divine, but is itself the divine. So, the clothing of the divine, the physical world is the clothing of the divine. Just like our body, mind, life are clothes which hide the soul. 3 layers. Okay. Never have been created unless it was. This is an answer to the Mayavadins who say, and the Buddhists who say, that physical world is nothing. It's not worth bothering about. So Swami is saying, no, it is worth bothering about. It would not have been created unless it had a purpose. That's what he's saying. The apparent inconscience of the material universe holds in itself darkly all that is eternally self-revealed in the luminous superconscious. To reveal it in time is the slow and deliberate delight of nature and the aim of our cycles. So, at the highest level, the divine is visible clearly. But when he comes down, he hides himself, and here he seems to be darkened, but in the darkness he is hiding. So you have to, here he is covered and there he is not covered, uncovered. Spirit and matter. Now, he is speaking of spirit and matter now. So now he says, but there are other conceptions of reality. You can see this in different ways. This reality which you can see as spirit and matter, you can also see it in different ways. Other conceptions of the nature of knowledge. Now, the study of reality is called ontology. And the study of knowledge, how do you get knowledge, is called epistemology. So they are 2 different things. Okay, so he is talking of both. There are other conceptions of reality, other conceptions of the nature of knowledge. So knowledge is gained through instruments and reality is experienced. So other ways of experiencing, which demand consideration. So now let's look at it, he says. Okay, there is the view that all that exists is a subjective creation of mind, a structure of consciousness, and that the idea of an objective reality, self-existent, independent of consciousness, is an illusion, since we have and can have no evidence of any such independent self-existence in things. Now, this requires a little bit of an explanation. We have done that earlier, but we will still consist. How do we experience the world? Through our senses. So, my eyes gather the image from there, it falls on the retina, and it's only an image. Then the nerves take it from with the optical nerve, it goes to the brain, which interprets what you are seeing. So, are you seeing the physical world? No. You are experiencing only the image in your mind. This is reality. And the proof is that if I eliminate the eye, I don't see. If I eliminate the ears, I don't see. I don't hear. So, in other words, it is your senses that are creating this image of the world for you. The world doesn't exist. That's a Buddhistic theory and also the Mayavada theory. The world is a creation of the mind. It's in your mind. And if you make your mind silent, the world disappears. It becomes an illusion.
And he says a subjective creation
That's
of
right.
the mind.
Subjective means my mind, subjective mind, is creating the universe.
Yes.
Okay? So, That's what he's saying. Now, note interestingly that this also there are three. I have the eye, I have the optic nerve, and I have the brain that interprets. Any one of these failing, the world disappears. If the eye is disappeared, I don't see. If my optic nerve is damaged, I go blind. And if the mind says, I am on a holiday, I don't want to interpret, that's a silent mind. The world becomes empty of content. You see the forms only without explanation. So this is what he is saying in this para. Okay? So and this is very interesting because so many philosophies are based on that. Yeah. Now this is very interesting because at this level it is true that the physical world is a creation of your own subjective creation. Now go to the highest level. What is creation? It's a conception in the divine mind. It is He who is creating. So that truth is applicable here in a very distorted manner. It's interesting. Yes. But the whole world, whole creation is nothing but a conception in the divine mind. There's nothing else. So, but there are other conceptions of the nature of knowledge which demand consideration. There is the view that all that exists is a subjective creation of mind. Actually, he should say also senses. Okay? It's a structure of consciousness. The consciousness is giving you a construction. Okay? And that the idea of an objective reality, self-existent, independent of consciousness, is an illusion. Because if my senses go away, the world doesn't exist for me. Since we have and can have no evidence of any such independent self-existence of things, this way of seeing may lead to the affirmation of a creative consciousness as the sole reality, or to the denial of all existence and the affirmation of non-existence, or a nascent zero as the sole reality. Now, this we have to understand perfectly. This way of seeing subjective creation, okay? So, this way of seeing may lead to the affirmation of a creative consciousness as a sole reality. So, let's look at this. So, the creative consciousness is real. That's one possibility. If that is real, then the world is real for me. Or the affirmation of a non-existence, or the nascent zero as the sole reality. So, in other words, you can say that the physical world doesn't exist because my senses are seeing it. So, two conceptions. The creative consciousness is creating a reality, or it's creating a unreality. Okay, agreed that the creative consciousness is creating. But is the creative consciousness itself real or unreal? That's a question. That's what is answering. Okay, you can take it as both.
And the zero contains everything.
Pardon?
The zero contains everything.
Yeah, the zero, that's the. So now, this creative consciousness can be, as I said too, it can be real or it can be unreal. If it is unreal, that's a Mayavada theory and the Buddhistic theory. Okay. And if it is real, you have the Advaita philosophy. That is the one that is creating everything, and everything is real. Okay, so for in one view, the objects constructed by consciousness have no intrinsic reality. They don't exist by themselves. Okay, I can see it creates in my mind something, and that is evanescent. It can disappear. For in one view, the objects constructed by consciousness have no intrinsic reality. They are merely structures. Okay? Even the consciousness that constructs them is itself only a flux of perceptions that assume an appearance of connection and continuity and create a sense of continuous time. But in reality, these things have no stable basis, as they are only an appearance of reality. So, your Your senses are creating the world for you, but the senses themselves will disappear in time. So that's a unreal creative consciousness. Or if you go to the higher level, you see that this creative consciousness is creating real world. That's the Advaita philosophy. Okay, so this would mean that the reality is an eternal absence at once of all self-conscious existence and of all that constitutes movement of existence. Knowledge would mean a return to that from which the appearance of the constructed universe. So, you are in ignorance because what you are seeing is unreal. So, knowledge means going to the source, not the world, but going to the source of the creative consciousness. That's knowledge. Okay, so knowledge would mean a return to that from the appearance of the constructed universe. There would be a double and complete self-extinction, the disappearance of Purusha, the cessation of or extinction of Prakriti. This is the Mayavada theory. The Purusha is the consciousness, there is no consciousness and there is no Prakriti, the world disappears. You have the Mayavada and the Buddhistic philosophy. He has used the word nihil, zero, a nascent zero of the soul reality. Okay, so there would be a double and complete self-extinction, the disappearance of Purusha, the cessation or extinction of Prakriti. Prakriti is nature, the physical world, and Purusha is consciousness, the creative consciousness. For the conscious soul and nature are the two terms of our being and comprehend all that we mean by existence. And the negation of both is the absolute nirvana. This is the Buddhistic way. It's possible to see it in that way. Okay? What is real then must be either an inconscience, which is that because that's what is creating the physical world, in which this flux and these structures appear, or a superconscience beyond all idea of self or existence. So, when you think that, in fact, science is saying that matter is creating the universe. Science is saying that matter is creating the universe. So, you have that theory. Or you have the theory that the superconscious is creating the universe. Okay? Beyond all idea of self or existence. But this view of the universe is only true of the appearance of things when we regard our surface mind as the whole of consciousness. So, there is a truth in this, but the truth is that which is perceived by the mind at present. Then this is possible, what you are saying. Is a creative consciousness. But this view of the universe is only true of the appearance of things when we regard our surface mind as a whole of consciousness. If you think a surface mind is a whole of consciousness, then you will end up with this theory. As a description of the working of that mind, it is valid. So long as you are in the normal mind, this view is valid. If I see that table is real, it is valid for me. I can go and touch it, use it. But if I am in the higher consciousness, then it's an illusion for me. It looks like nothing. Even I don't exist. That's a Buddhistic and the Mayavada theory. So, as a description of the working of that mind, it is valid. There undoubtedly all looks like a flux and a construction by an impermanent consciousness. But this cannot prevail as a whole account of existence. We cannot exist. If they are saying, I cannot accept this as the whole account of existence. If there is a greater and deeper self-knowledge and world knowledge, a knowledge by identity, a consciousness to which that knowledge is normal, and a being of which that consciousness is the eternal awareness. Is it true that our mind is the only reality, or is there not a consciousness which is higher than that? If there is higher, I can't accept this theory. That's what he's saying. Okay? So, for then the subjective and the objective can be real and intimate to that consciousness and being. Both can be something of itself, sides of its identity authentic to its existence. So you go to a higher level, then you see a different way of looking at things. I'll read the summary of what we have
Summary is good.
Yeah. Okay. But there are other theories of reality and knowledge, and these have to be considered. The Buddhistic ontology holds that all that exists is really a construction of the mind. The senses convey the data they gather to the brain through the nerves, and the brain interprets these images of sight, hearing, smell, touch, taste. The external world disappears for the individual if senses, nerves, brain do not function. Okay, so the external world disappears. One theory is that the creative consciousness is the sole reality and all the rest is illusion, shadow play. This is the Mayavada view. The second view is that the last experience is that of the total non-existence of everything. Nirvana is the last sole featureless reality. This is the Buddhistic view. The first view asserts that what the sole real consciousness creates are all constructed images without real substance, even same than the experience. They are only appearances and give the impression of continuity and connection. The world is a continuous series of images without stability or reality. One has to get away from the shadow play and enter the sole reality. This is the Mayavada view. The second view is that everything is illusion. Neither does the world exist nor any other reality. The final reality is nihil, zero, shunyam, nirvana. This is a double extinction, that of Purusha as well as Prakriti. The goal is nirvana, the nihil of everything man considers real. Since all existence is soul and nature, and both are extinguished, the final reality is either a superconscious or an inconscious. This view is valid as the experience of nirvana is a spiritual fact. It is valid if we consider mental cognition as the entire and only consciousness that exists. So long as you take the mind to be the ultimate creator, you have the Buddhistic theory. But if consciousness is more than mere mentality, this view is only a partial view and not the entire truth. Is there something higher? If there is something higher, we can't accept this theory. There is a greater knowledge than mind and knowledge by identity exists. This is what he is saying in the para. On the other hand, if the constructing mind or consciousness is real and the sole reality, then the universe of material beings and objects may have an existence, but it is purely subjective structural, made by consciousness out of itself, maintained by it, dissolving into it in their disappearance. For if there is nothing else, no essential existence or being supporting the creative power, and there is not either a sustaining void or nihil, then this consciousness which creates everything must itself have or to be an existence or a substance. Okay? An existence or a substance. If it can make structures, they must be constructions out of its own substance or forms of its existence. A consciousness which is not that of an existence or is not itself an existence must be an unreality. A perceptive force of a void or in a void, raising there unreal structures made of nothing. A proposition which is not easily acceptable unless all others prove to be invalid. It then becomes apparent that what we see as consciousness must be a being and an existence out of whose substance of consciousness all is created. So, he is saying that if there is this consciousness which has a substance to it, then, and that is the real one, then it is using the substance to create forms. In fact, this is very interesting. Think of Satchidananda, Sat Chit Shakti Ananda. there is consciousness. In other words, there is knowledge. I know how to create the world. But I may not have power, but Satchidananda has the power, Chit Shakti. So it has the power to create what it knows and how to create. And while it is creating, it also enjoys what it is doing. Okay? So this is Satchidananda. Now consider, even in the physical world, when you want to create something, what do you need? You need exactly these 4 elements. Okay? Let's say, I usually use that one Ratan Tata, okay, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, he wanted to make a car which cost only 1 lakh. Okay? I think he called it the Nano or something. Okay? So, what does he need? He needs the knowledge. He must know the technology of how to make it. Chit, consciousness, knowledge. But he must have the material. He must have the steel. He must have the elements to make a car. Sat, that's a substance. Then he must have also power. So he needs labor or electricity or whatever. So with all these things are there, only construction is possible. So that which is Satchidananda is real, and therefore it makes a real world. So that's what he's saying.
Thank you, Ranga. Namaste. And we'll see you again on Saturday to continue this series in the Life Divine, Reality and Integral Knowledge.